everybody. Happy Cesar Chavez Day. I'm your host, Caitlin Saposi Belknap, Move to Amend's National Director, coming to you live from Sacramento, California. I know that everywhere doesn't celebrate Cesar Chavez Day, but here in California we do, and it's a state holiday. So hope you've been thinking about farm workers today, because that's who we rely on to give us food. You can find us here on the last Wednesday of every month at 5 o'clock Pacific, right here on Facebook Live, Twitter, and YouTube. Move to Amend is the campaign to pass the We the People Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to make clear that corporations don't have constitutional rights and to get big money out of politics. Today, we have a bunch of news and updates, so stay put, don't go anywhere. But before we get started, you can help us spread the word, share or retweet this live stream using the hashtags MoveToAmend and hashtag LiveReport for a chance to win a free t-shirt. At the end of the report, we always give out prizes, so we're going to give out t-shirts this time, and we'll give one to Facebook listeners and also someone on Twitter. Again, if you just share the live feed using the hashtag MoveToAmend, that's how we will find your share so that you can get put in the pool. And same deal with Twitter. Retweet this live feed with the hashtag MoveToAmend, and we'll pick one from each platform. You can also ask me your questions at any point during the broadcast. I will answer them at the end, but feel free to type them in anytime. In the meantime, also feel free to type in and just say hello and where you're tuning in from, and get the ball rolling. Thanks for being here with me tonight. So first up is our corporate rule news. All right. March is almost gone. April is just hours away, but the madness doesn't end with March, nor does COVID yet. States like Mississippi and Texas are ready to allow businesses to reopen at 100%. And the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, is ready to sue any local public official that dares to publicly defy the state's moratorium on mask mandates. Yep, that's right. The latest high-profile clash over local control is unfolding in Austin and surrounding Travis County, which are together fighting Governor Texas Greg Abbott's move to open the state up 100% and to prevent jurisdictions from imposing their own mask mandates to control the spread of the coronavirus. At the same time, Texas is still getting over 7,000 new cases of coronavirus a day, and just 12% of the state's population is fully vaccinated, which makes Texas among the lowest vaccinated of any U.S. state, according to post-tracking. Governor Abbott and his minions are clearly showing their true colors, putting corporations and profits over the well-being of the public. But what can you expect from Abbott, the guy that welcomed Elon Musk after the second richest man in the world, moved much of his business operations from California to avoid paying taxes, even though Musk's businesses rely heavily on public subsidies? All while Musk was seriously squeezing California's government officials for every last dime. And on top of that, Musk had the nerve to accuse California of complacency and to whine about health orders meant to save people's lives. Unsurprisingly, more than 400 Tesla workers tested positive for coronavirus recently after Musk reopened a plant in Fremont, California. Musk played down the severity of the pandemic and reopened this plant back in May, defiant of guidelines issued by local public health officials. I assume these are the kinds of freedoms that Musk and his company will now enjoy in Texas, a state that has no personal income tax, ranks 40th in environmental protections, and has very lax workers' rights. And as we learned from local sources, this particular region in South Texas that Musk chose for his SpaceX launch site has a long history of corruption by local and state officials. So the tweet that Musk made yesterday about his philanthropic $30 million donation, $20 million for the local school district, and $10 million for revitalizing Brownsville's downtown area, cough, cough, can you say gentrification, raises suspicions whether the money will actually trickle down to any of the people. Because, as various local activists have pointed out, the mayor and many of the city commissioners own businesses and buildings in the downtown area that Musk intends to revitalize. We'll have to wait and see how events unravel, but my money is on this being a hugely hyped kickback, basically, for local city leaders. But for now, we can only raise concern and share what we have learned as Californians who are all too familiar with the hazards of living amongst the very rich tech barons. And we know this particular billionaire pretty well. There's nothing philanthropic about his donation or him. This is more like his way of trying to buy some good PR for him and his company, which is causing damage and exploitation of the land down in Texas, all while exploiting a capital gains tax loophole for investing in economically disadvantaged areas, which is that region in Brownsville, which we have previously discussed on this show. And speaking about the environmental impact, they are not just local, the environmental impact, as astronomers are now thinking that the streaking light that's been seen over the states of Oregon and Washington probably came from the Falcon 9 rocket launched by SpaceX on March 4th as it was re-entering Earth's atmosphere. So it turns out tax evasion and polluting the environment and space are not the only wrongdoings that Musk has been up to, though. The National Labor Relations Board, or NLRB, says Elon Musk threatened workers and fired Richard Ortiz for union organizing back in 2018. Musk made a tweet that sparked an investigation into the company by the NLRB into union busting tactics employed by Musk and his company. And now, 3 years later, the NLRB found that not only did Musk violate federal labor law with that tweet, but he also illegally fired Ortiz for protected union activity. The NLRB ordered Tesla to offer Ortiz his job back and to compensate him for lost earnings, benefits, and any adverse tax consequences that resulted from his firing. Tesla is also required to revise their confidentiality agreements that are given to employees to take out a section that bars workers from speaking to the media without explicit written permission from the company. National labor law, quote, protects employees when they speak with the media about working conditions, labor disputes, or other terms and conditions of employment. This is a really important victory for workers who have had the courage to stand up and organize in a system that is currently stacked heavily in favor of employers. And it's also a great segue for our next corporate rule story about the employees of the other richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos. Amazon workers in Bessemer, Alabama are fighting for their right to unionize, and they're in the final stretch. Votes were cast this week and the tally is underway. A victory would not only be one of the biggest labor victories in the United States in decades, the facility would also be the first union facility owned by Amazon in the United States. The mail-in ballots were due this past Monday, and federal officials began tallying the votes yesterday in what has been the most closely watched unionization drive in the United States in many years. There are numerous things working for the union, like the fact that employees are unhappy with the fast, stressful pace of work, and many complain that they have too little voice on their job. And about 85% of the Bessemer workers are African American, and Black workers tend to be more pro-union than white workers. But at the same time, many factors are also working against the union. The organizing drive is in a very deep red state where the business community and many politicians have been vigorously opposing organized labor for years. Amazon is a hugely powerful, vehemently anti-union company and is carrying out a fierce and expensive campaign to defeat the union. So far, the count is still underway, but even when it ends, the chances that either party challenges the results are high, so a clear outcome is not expected soon, and we'll continue to follow the situation. It's really disheartening to see Amazon's former CEO, Jeff Bezos, who saw his personal wealth increase by $65 billion during the pandemic alone, more than $7 million every hour, put so much money and effort into union busting. But clearly, Bezos was not the only one that benefited from the pandemic conditions by having essentially their competitions shut down, or like in the case of Tennessee's billionaire Frist family, from being the leading shareholders in the nation's largest private healthcare conglomerate. Yep, this hospital-owning family made a killing during the pandemic, more than doubling their wealth. They went from $7.5 billion on March 18th, 2020 to $15.6 billion on March 8th of this year. That's $8.1 billion in 1 year. To put it in perspective, the Frists have accumulated more wealth during the pandemic than any of the nation's 27 healthcare sector billionaires, who include big pharma and biotech owners and shareholders. But while the Frists may rank first among profitable medical industrial complex billionaires, they are far from the only plutocrats enjoying stupendous gains during a pandemic. A January report by IPS and the Americans for Tax Fairness revealed that the nation's 660 billionaires added a combined $1.1 trillion to their fortunes since March. I just want to go off script here for a second to underscore how much money that is. I don't have like the numbers in front of me, but I just think anytime we're talking about billions or trillions and we're not talking about like governments like the United States government, we need to stop for a second and just pause and try to even comprehend how much money that is, because literally no human being will be able to spend that kind of money in their lifetime. There's absolutely no way. And even, you know, when they give it to all of their descendants, the amount of money that we're talking about is disgusting. And there's no reason why any one person or family would need any kind of wealth like that. So it's just like every time I try to force myself to think about it, because I think we're at this point used to rattling off these numbers and, you know, how different does a billion versus a trillion sound? But the amount is astronomical, and we need to sort of pause because it's not even something that our brains can actually comprehend and wrap themselves around unless we force them to do that. So back to these stories, though. As the billionaire's wealth multiplies during the pandemic, a new report shows that 1/3 of all COVID deaths in the United States were tied to a lack of insurance. I'm going to read that one again because as I was reading this over ahead of time, that was not something that I knew or realized, and that's just astounding. It is a travesty of monumental proportions. So these billionaires have been multiplying their wealth during the pandemic, and a report shows that 1/3 of the people who died from COVID did so because they had a lack of insurance. Basic human needs not met. And so, you know, we're talking about tens of thousands of people who died who didn't need to. This report comes as Democratic Congress members Pramila Jayapal, who is our amendment lead sponsor, and Debbie Dingell were introducing the Medicare for All Act of 2021, a bill that we at Move to Amend absolutely support. But as we always point out, this kind of legislation needs our We the People amendment to actually make it effective, to actually back it up, because otherwise bills like Medicare for All will likely fall victim to a gutting in the courts after they pass, meaning that if corporations continue to have constitutional rights, then legislation like Medicare for All is vulnerable to being overturned in large part or potentially entirely by the courts under the argument that it somehow or other violates corporate constitutional rights. And you know that these billionaires are going to try and hold on to their private insurance killing that they're making at all costs, right? So unless we remove their ability to use the Constitution against us as we move forward with something like Medicare for All, then we're not going to really be able to move forward. But we'll be talking about the We the People amendment and an update from our campaign a little bit later. First, I want to speak to a couple of cases that are coming up before the Supreme Court that we're keeping an eye on. In April, the Supreme Court will hear a case that has been turned into a bit of a punchline, the story of the foul-mouthed 14-year-old cheerleader burdening the judiciary with her insistence on a constitutional right to curse out her coach on Snapchat. In case you haven't heard the story, here's the gist of it. In 2017, ninth grader Brandy Levy said on Snapchat some version of what stressed out students have been saying in the back of the school bus since the invention of buses. Basically, fuck school, fuck softball, fuck cheerleading, fuck everything. The post was shared on a Saturday afternoon during a trip to the local convenience store, disappeared from Snapchat by Sunday afternoon, and caused no disturbance at school whatsoever, except to irritate the cheerleading coach who banned Levy from the squad for a year. Levy filed suit, and in June 2020, a federal appeals court ruled that school authorities violated her First Amendment, by disciplining her for off-campus speech. Now, the Mahanoy district is asking the Supreme Court to overturn that ruling. Sure, it makes sense that the school has some authority over speech on school grounds during school time, but off campus, when no one is compelled to listen and the audience is anyone with internet access, things should be getting a bit tricky, right? So political and social advocacy sometimes involves using harsh language. Outside of school, it's well established that flipping a middle finger to a police officer, for example, to express contempt is actually constitutionally protected speech, thanks to the enduring pillar of the Supreme Court's First Amendment jurisprudence in Cohen versus California. But if the Mahanoy district prevails, a social media photo showing a student wearing her anti-Trump jacket, say, could become punishable offense if it caused even one classmate to complain. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on any developments regarding this SCOTUS case because of all the huge consequences for free speech that it may bring. We may find ourselves in a situation where corporations have more rights than students, even when they're not at school. Just like this other case that we're also closely monitoring, which is a clash between union campaigns and private property of corporations, and that's also before the Supreme Court. So this week, the court began hearing arguments in a case that's been brought by a strawberry plant nursery in Northern California, arguing that the access representatives of the United Farm Workers get to meet with workers and urge them to consider unionizing amounts to a government takings of private property without compensation. There's long been a law on the books in California, which allows labor organizers access to farm workers on the property of companies that they work for before work hours and after work hours, given the fact that farm workers are oftentimes a migrant population, hard to access, and there is no place to find them. And so that was something that was fought for by the United Farm Workers many years ago. It's long been standing, but now the strawberry nursery plant is trying to get that law overturned. The case is the court's first major encounter with labor disputes since the arrival of Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and it has the potential to define what union organizers can do on California farms. But it also could have far-reaching consequences beyond union campaigns, including limiting the government's ability to enter private property to conduct health and safety inspections of facilities like coal mines and pharmaceutical plants, and to perform home visits by social workers charged with ensuring child welfare. There are reasons to believe the court will be skeptical of the access regulation. The court has in recent years dealt blows to public unions and limited the ability of workers to band together to take legal action over workplace issues. And at the same time, the court has been protective of property rights over the rights of workers. So we'll keep you informed of the implications of this case as well. It's another one of these examples where, there's multiple constitutional rights that are in question, right? There's the property rights of the corporation. There's also the free speech rights of the union organizers and the rights to hear speech on the part of the workers. And we do know that in general, on the whole, the courts have ruled more in favor of the property rights of corporations over the free speech rights of workers. So we'll see what happens. There's no shortage of high-profile cases, but as our final story, we want to talk about a case that shook the whole nation, the trial of Derek Chauvin, the white former police officer charged with murdering George Floyd. Most people listening are probably already familiar with the events surrounding Floyd's death after a bystander video went viral, showing Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck for almost 9 minutes during an arrest attempt. Chauvin is denying the charges of murder and manslaughter against him, and instead the defense team is trying to focus the jury on irrelevant aspects, such as the fact that opioid fentanyl was found in Floyd's system, as well as methamphetamine, and that he had underlying health conditions. But the official autopsy concluded that Floyd's death was a homicide. And so far, 6 bystanders have testified on the second day of Chauvin's criminal trial: a 9-year-old girl, 3 high school students, a mixed martial arts fighter, and a Minneapolis firefighter, all sharing the feelings of horror and fear that they witnessed as George Floyd slowly died in front of them under the knee of former police officer Derek Chauvin last May. Today, Genevieve Hansen, the off-duty firefighter who witnessed Floyd's murder when she was out for a walk, resumed her testimony. She was the 3rd person to call 911 to report what police had done. Donald Wynn Williams II, the mixed martial arts fighter that witnessed Floyd's death, said that Chauvin performed a blood choke, quote unquote, on Floyd and adjusted his positioning several times to maintain pressure on Floyd's neck. Despite Williams and others pleading with officers to let Floyd breathe, they were directed to stay away by Officer Tao, who will also face a trial along with the two other former officers later in the summer. So what's next? Witness testimony in the trial is expected to last about a month, 4 weeks, followed by jury deliberations where the anonymous jurors will decide whether Chauvin should serve time in prison or be acquitted. Mr. Chauvin is charged with second-degree murder, which means causing death without intent. The maximum sentence is 40 years. A third-degree murder charge has also recently been added. Experts say the new charge is easier to prove in court, but it does carry a lesser penalty. And according to Minnesota state law, the maximum penalty for third-degree murder is 25 years. This is without a doubt one of the most important trials in America, and anything short of a conviction will likely lead to more protests all around the country. But we'll continue to monitor this trial closely and report any updates, whether we're talking about it on Making Sense this Friday or in the coming weeks, or on the April live report, depending on how long the full trial takes. So that's the news on corporate rule. But in the meantime, don't go anywhere right now. Next up, we have our campaign updates from the Move to Amend. You're listening to the Move to Amend's monthly live report. I'm Caitlin Saposi-Belknap, Move to Amend's national director. Move to Amend is the campaign to pass the We the People Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to make clear that corporations don't have constitutional rights and to get big money out of politics. You can ask me your questions at any point during this broadcast. I will answer them at the end. And remember that if you help us spread the word, we will be sharing a t-shirt with one Facebook winner and one Twitter winner. Just retweet or share this broadcast using the hashtag #MoveToAmend and hashtag live report. And we will pick one person from Facebook and one person from Twitter who does that. And we will send you a t-shirt on us as thanks for helping to spread the word. So Move to Amend's campaign updates. We're almost half of the way to our campaign goal. So the We the People Amendment is pending introduction. We're waiting to get to the number 48. So the way that it works is Pramila Jayapal, who is our lead, has earmarked 48 because that's the number that we have had for the last 3 Congresses. And this will be the 5th time that it's been reintroduced. And so we want to hang on to that number because it's something that at this point we all remember and know, and we have a lot of literature that has it and things like that. But Congress has been a little bit slow on introducing new amendment proposals, a little bit slower than normal. Our amendment has always been introduced by February, the end of February, since we've started to have 48. But this time it's not quite there yet. So they're on number 37. So we've got 11 to go, and we're very hopeful that over the course of next month, over April, we'll get to that number 48 and we will get it introduced. So what we have been working on in the meantime is securing folks to commit to co-sponsoring, because every new Congress, we need to get everybody to come back on. We had 68 members who were signed on last year who are still in Congress. We actually had 75, but not everybody returned to Congress for all kinds of various reasons. So we had 68 folks. So we're working to get those to commit back and hoping to add some new ones from both the pool of new representatives, but also new folks new to us. So we have 43 committed, and we're working hard on getting to the rest, and our goal is 100. So just yesterday, we had a virtual legislative briefing for congressional staff, which we were able to do online because that's the way the world is now. So we had a number of offices attend, and hopefully through the follow-up, they will commit and come on. So that's what we'll be working on over the next couple weeks. We have really been trying to get constituents to join us for these virtual meetings. And so if we have contacted you and let you know that we need somebody from your district, then I hope that you will step up and join us. It's a relatively easy thing to do. You just need to get a little bit of background information under your belt, but you'll be joined by a Move to Amend staff organizer. And so you won't be all on your own. We can help fill in the blanks on any questions that you get asked that you may not know. Most of the time you'll be meeting with a congressional staffer. We are asking for a meeting with a representative. And so sometimes that does pan out, but for the most part, we are directed to meet with a staff person, which is just fine because staff are the main people who are making recommendations to the representative in terms of what to decide what to support. And so it's really important that we educate the congressional staff to understand this issue and answer all their questions, because they're the ones that the representatives actually look to for advice and recommendation on whether to sign on. So joining us for one of those meetings, the meetings normally take 20 to 30 minutes. And then we continue to follow up and make sure that they've passed it along to their boss and that they're going to come on. So that's one really important way that you can help. You can go to our website, movetoamend.org/117 campaign for the 117th Congress, and you can see the list of our targets. So if your representative is on that list, please let us know if you're willing to help, and then we can plug you in to the efforts to reach out to that Congress member. If your Congress member is not on our target list, that doesn't mean that we don't want to reach out to them as well. We've just kind of picked the most likely candidates to start with. But if you want to help set up a meeting with your representative, regardless of where you live and who they are, then let's make it happen. The other thing that you can do is make a donation to support our work that we're doing to recruit Congress support. Or you could also record a short video, 30 seconds or less, of yourself saying why you support the We the People Amendment and urging your congressperson to support it and co-sponsor it. And then we will make sure that video goes to your congressperson. We've heard feedback that with so many offices not really taking calls, you'll have to kind of leave a message and no way to meet other than virtually. And honestly, email does a little bit, but it is so much more effective to kind of find new ways. So recording these videos is something that we have found to be more effective than doing phone calls or even emails. And so if you haven't recorded a video yet, please do it. It takes 30 seconds, literally, maybe 2 minutes altogether. It doesn't need, you don't need to make the best case in the world. You just need to say, one reason why you support the We the People Amendment, why you think that corporate personhood needs to end and we need to get big money out of politics. And that's it. It's really easy. We'll provide you with everything you need to make the call, including just some rough talking points. And Alfonso will provide the links here on this thread, so you can just really easily just go and record your video as soon as this broadcast is done. So that's our big work that we're working on right now. A couple other things that we want to make sure that you know about. Every Friday, we do Making Sense with Move to Amend. We go live, interact with you all, answer questions, share our thoughts. It's normally 2 folks from our team. We rotate so you get a flavor of kind of different people's perspective and backgrounds and, style. And we share our thoughts on current events and hear yours. It's part of what we're doing during the pandemic, and we've continued it on to provide an opportunity to be closer to you all and connect you better with the work that we're doing in real time. So feel free to make suggestions to what you'd like to see us to talk about. We always take those into consideration. This Friday, Greg and Keon will be hosting Making Sense, and that's at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, right here on our social media channels. And then lastly, want to make sure that everybody knows about our project Toward a People's Constitution. Last December, on International Human Rights Day, we launched our new and long-awaited website, peoplesconstitution.us. Seems like more and more people are coming to agree that the system is flawed in part because of our Constitution, the base of this country, and that we need to do more than just one amendment to change that. So more and more people have been coming to us and drawing the same conclusion as we have. It's time to think big and bold. And are you ready to envision a people's constitution? So check out that website. Look at the ideas there. It is meant to be a discussion point. It is not at this time like an organizing campaign. It is an education and visioning campaign. So you can find out all the information at peoplesconstitution.us and learn more about the project by going to peoplesconstitution.us/join in order to stay in the loop. So that's our update on what we've got going on, but I am happy to answer any questions about it. Next up will be our dispatch from the grassroots, but I need to say before we go to that you're listening to Move to Amend's monthly live report. I am Caitlin Sposey-Belknap, Move to Amend's National Director. Move to Amend is the campaign to pass the We the People Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to make clear that corporations do not have constitutional rights and to get big money out of politics. Ask me your questions, and I'll answer them at the end. And don't forget to help us spread the word and potentially get a free t-shirt. Next up will be our dispatch from the grassroots. So most of our grassroots activists have been working on the 117th campaign, moving the 117th Congress to amend, trying to get us as close as we can to our goal of 100 co-sponsors at introduction. And because 100 is our goal for the year, and we'd like to knock it out as soon as we can, maybe even before the amendment is introduced. So shout out to anybody and everybody who has been organizing congressional meetings in your district, doing phone banking to try and get people to call your rep and to put this issue out in front of them so that they feel some pressure, which is a little hard since the amendment hasn't even been introduced yet and gives us a little bit of an organizing challenge. So shout out to everybody who's been working on that, but also wanted to just give a couple announcements about some of the educational and outreach work that folks are doing in various places. So our folks in Central Ohio Move to Amend have been connecting the dots between the nature of corporate rule, the democracy movement, and current events in the world through a monthly education series called Speaking of Democracy, featuring local, state, and national speakers on topics ranging from the local impacts of the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Stay tuned for the next presentation through the Ohio Move to Amend calendar. And my understanding is these events are open since they're virtual. Even if you don't live in Ohio, you can attend and get the information and participate. So if you go to movetoamend.org/Ohio, you can get to the calendar there. Our grassroots leaders in Minnesota Move to Amend State Network have been actively engaging their local communities in a movement education program style project called Imagining Democracy. Movement education program is a program that Move to Amend put together initially for our activists as an internal education and analysis building program to learn history of social movements, to learn some shared understanding and analysis around oppression and privilege and how that plays out in our ability to effectively organize together and build social movements. And so the folks in Minnesota have taken that foundation and built upon it with their own program called Imagining Democracy, a 6-session discussion series featuring readings on several intersectional issues of human rights, democracy, anti-oppression, and corporate rule. During COVID, this series has shifted to online meetings, which are the 4th Monday of the month. And so the next session will be April 26th. And if you want to participate, you can email St. Paul at movetoamend.org to receive the online meeting connection, any schedule changes, and the readings in advance of the discussions. And our folks in Santa Clara County, California Move to Amend continue their regular movie night and discussion series for anyone living in the South Bay area of California. Tonight at 7 o'clock Pacific, you can watch the film Capital in the 21st Century via Zoom, followed by a discussion of the film afterwards. For more details, contact our folks at Santa Clara at movetoamend.org. So that's it with the campaign updates. Again, most of what we're focusing on is congressional outreach in in anticipation of our amendment getting introduced soon. I'm here to answer your questions that you might have. And don't forget to stay tuned to the end to see if you're one of our t-shirt winners. Looks like Donald really wants to know about our support for the People's Party. So I'll answer that. Move to Amend is nonpartisan. We don't support any political parties, but also we do not ask our individual leaders to be silent about where they stand. So we have done partnerships with political parties that support Move to Amend. So in some cases that has meant the Green Party, which has Move to Amend's amendment in their platform. The People's Party also has Move to Amend in their, and the We the People Constitutional amendment in their platform too. And a number of Democratic parties have Move to Amend language in their state platforms and in their local platforms. And so we are happy. And actually, I should say that there is one local Republican Party in Iowa that some years ago put a plank in support of Move to Amend in their platform as well. So we don't do, I see Sue's question, we don't actively outreach to political parties. We have responded when they have come to us. So if folks from the Vermont Progressive Party would like to support Move to Amend by putting language in their platform, or, you know, getting their candidates to support Move to Amend's proposal, that's generally the first step. That's what we wait for. And then we are happy to work with political parties, making clear that we don't support any one political party. We're trying to move forward our political agenda and recognize that we need candidates to do that. And oftentimes where candidates are organized are from our political parties. And so that's where we stand. Anyone else have any questions? See, it's not a question, but Mark is saying that a People's Constitutional Congress frightens him. He fears that it would open Pandora's box for the moneyed corporate interest to overwhelm the process. So just want to be clear that I think you're talking about in reference to the People's Constitution, and that's certainly one of the things that we'd have to grapple with. At the same time, we just need to figure out what to do about the fact that the United States has one of the weakest human rights constitutions out there, certainly of any democracy. And that puts us at a huge disadvantage when we're trying to advance human rights or environmental rights. And the fact that if we continue to stay scared of addressing the law in a fundamental way, then we'll continue to be in the same boat that we're in, right? So we need to figure out how to build from there. One of the things that we talk about at Move to Amend is, you know, at the end of the day, the problem is really that we don't have power in this country. We, the people, do not have power to influence meaningfully the institutions that make the decisions that affect our lives. And so that's what we need to grapple with, is that fact that we don't have that kind of political power. So how do we build a movement towards gaining that power? And how do we exercise power that we do have to build more? And we believe that it doesn't serve us to continue to leave constitutional reform off of the table. We also have looked at one of our original founders, who was no longer active with Move to Amend, but still is very much a friend of Move to Amend, went on to get his PhD and now is a professor teaching about constitutional reform in various countries and constitutional revolutions. And one of the things that he has found and helped us to understand is that there's a certain inevitability about it when we are in a situation like ours, where people do not have access to meaningfully leverage power. And so given that, when there is not a push from social movements for constitutional change, and it potentially happens anyway, it doesn't go in the right direction. So that's the other piece that we need to reckon with. The reality that, you know, there are corporate leadership and you know, the billionaire class, et cetera, very much engage in how to use the Constitution to benefit them. And if we leave that all off the table, we're leaving a lot of power on the table. So that is what we want to try to work on and, through with this People's Constitution Project. When you go to the website, you will not see, a new draft of the Constitution and a proposal that we organize constitutional conventions at the state level, all over the place in order to move forward this agenda. What we are doing is beginning the conversation, because if we don't, then somebody else will, and it probably will not be what we would want. So how do we figure that out? So I just really, really encourage us in general that if we are frightened by something, running away from it doesn't really help us build the power. It's how are we going to grapple with the very real fears that you have and the concerns, and push through and push for a more democratic country anyway, because that's what the people of this country need. That's what the people of the planet need us to do in the United States. And it's certainly what all of the other creatures of this planet need from us. All right, let's see some other questions. Any plans to introduce the amendment in the Senate? Yes, we definitely would like to see the amendment introduced in the Senate, and we have been working on that. At this time, there isn't much that I can say in this public forum about where things are at with that, other than if you think that your senator would be a good candidate to come on board, they need to hear from you and other constituents that this is a priority. We have not been able to move this forward in the Senate as much as we would like, and it is because the Senate is not a particularly democratically inclined or grassroots accountable institution. So we'll continue to do that work, but I am sorry to say that we don't really have any leaders in the Senate at this time who are willing to put their necks out there and make it happen. So we're going to continue to push on them. Right now, our national team's focus in terms of our resources is focused on the House and getting it introduced there. And we do feel as though the more support that we have in the House with its introduction, the stronger our case will be to then turn to the Senate. But that is, then there will be a good amount of work still to do in the Senate. We've had a handful of offices tell us that they would introduce it and then back away from that. So that's where we are now, and we're going to continue to try and hold them accountable. Maybe there's some hope with some of the new senators. We'll work on every avenue that we've got available to us, and we will also keep you posted. And then as an organization, if we are unable to get it introduced in the Senate soon, then I think that we also need to acknowledge that we'll need to reckon with what to do about that. If the Senate is so unaccountable to the will of the people, which we know is overwhelmingly in support of this amendment, what does that mean? What does that mean for our country if the Senate is so corporately captured that we actually can't even get them to introduce it? Because at this point, I don't think that there's anything the move to amend could be doing more or differently. It is the substance of our amendment that scares the Senate. And I'm talking about even the progressive ones. And so what does that say about our Senate leadership? That's all I can probably say about that right now without maybe getting into hot water. Let's see. Larry asked, did Representative Peter Welch of Vermont and or his staff show up for yesterday's Zoom briefing? I can't say right now. We're not saying publicly whether a representative is committed, just because it's just not a good idea for us to be out there publicly announcing for anybody before the amendment is actually introduced. So if you have a question about your particular representative and where they're at, the best thing to do would be to email us at info@movetoamend.org, and we can give you an update and let you know. His staff did not attend the briefing. However, we are going to send the recording out to everybody who's on our target list. And so his office will get it. And follow up with us, Larry, and we can kind of give you a little bit more information about any particular representative. We just don't want to get out in front of them and have anybody feel as though they got asked a question that they weren't prepared to answer because the amendment actually hasn't even been introduced. So what we're doing right now, all this work that we're doing to secure co-sponsors before the amendment is even introduced, is not normally how they operate. There's nothing wrong about it. For sure, it's within our rights to secure support, but it isn't the conventional way of doing things. So we're just trying to be careful about making sure that our friends in Congress who support the amendment don't feel as though we're stepping on their toes in any way, if that makes sense. There's a lot of decorum to navigate, especially with the Senate, but with the House too. So we're doing our best to navigate it. And I wouldn't want anyone to feel as though they got flashed out and then, had to answer for it. So what you can continue to do is contact the office and tell them. The other thing we have found is some offices are telling people who call that they've already signed on. So certainly if they tell you, then that's great. I just don't want to put it out there on a broadcast right now. Hope that makes sense. Anybody else have any other questions that I can answer for you before we're done for the night? Oh, it looks like Alfonso already put out there, so I'll just say it. The winners of the t-shirt are Tom VCS345 on Twitter, Tom, and Sandy Lee Shirley on Facebook. So send us a direct message via that platform, or you could email us at info@movetoamend.org and just let us know your t-shirt size and your address. And we will get that shipped off to you really soon. I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the next thing. We always do hell yeah moment, so don't leave. We leave you with a little bit of good news before we sign off. I will be back here next month, April 28th. We always do this on the last Wednesday of the month, except for when we don't, but that's the standard. So right now, that's the plan, April 28th. That will also be our April Day of Action. I really hope I'll be able to talk to you about how the amendment has been introduced and we're good to go. So fingers crossed. And also let's make that happen with as many co-sponsors as we possibly can. That's something we all can do. We can't control how quickly they introduce resolutions though. So that's up to the Congress. I'm not going to call them gods. Anyways, I'll be back here on April 28th, but remember that you can check out this same channel, whichever way you're tuning in with us, every Friday at noon Pacific for Making Sense. And you will be graced with the presence of two lovely Move to Amend folks. And this week it will be Keon and Greg who will be with you to make sense of the week's news. So the hell yeah moment tonight is good news. The California condor is going to be reintroduced to parts of the West after a 100-year absence. After a century of absence, the endangered California condor is set to return to the skies of the Pacific Northwest thanks to the reintroduction efforts that have been largely led by the Yurok tribe of Northern California. From barely 22 free birds in the wild in the early 1980s, experts are estimating the number of free birds flying now is more than 300. As scavengers, the birds are an essential part of nature's cleanup crew. For the Yurok people, the return of the condor represents a milestone. The condor plays a critical role in the people's tradition and culture, and the return of the bird to ancestral territory brings with it a sense of renewal for both. I used to live in Yurok country, or adjacent to Yurok country when I lived in far northern California. Now I live in Sacramento. I had no idea that the California condor habitat was so far up into now Northern California. So we have a video for you about this good news and a bit of hope as we sign off. Thanks for tuning in with me tonight and for being here. You can always contact us through our website if you have follow-up questions. Also, if you're listening to the recording, obviously, I can't answer any more questions, but we will follow up with comments. So feel free to chime in with your questions and we will answer them as best we can in the comments. Thanks so much, Alfonso, for producing tonight. And hope everybody out there stays safe. Keep wearing your masks. keep remembering that we're not out of a pandemic. And if we act like we are, then we will never get there. All right, everyone. Good night. And cheers to the California condor. I hope that we get to way more than 300 birds very, very soon. Good night.
After a century of absence,
corporations are not people too. Money is not speech.
After a century of absence, the endangered California condor is set to return to the skies of the Pacific Northwest. The condor once soared from British Columbia to Mexico, but habitat loss, overhunting and, most significantly, poisoning from hunting ammunition drove the birds to near extinction. By the early 1980s, these threats had caused such a precipitous decline in the population that only 22 remained in the wild. In an effort to regrow their numbers, biologists captured the remaining birds and began a breeding program. Since then, the condor has been reintroduced to South and Central California. Its population has expanded into parts of Utah, Arizona and Baja California in Mexico, with experts estimating the number of free-flying birds at more than 300. Now, the bird will be reintroduced in Northern California. The reintroduction efforts there have largely been led by the Yurok tribe, whose ancestral land encompasses large swaths of forest and coastline in Northern California and parts of Redwood National Park that were once home to the condor. The tribe has planned for the bird's return for over a decade, and its proposal was accepted on the 24th of March by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Through close collaboration with Redwood National Park, the tribe will begin the creation of a captive breeding facility within the boundaries of the park. The facility will house captive-bred condors that could be released into the park as early as this fall. Although the condor population is on the uphill, its survival in the Golden State still faces challenges. California has banned lead shot and ammunition, but the laws are unlikely to completely eradicate the lead poisoning problem. Poaching of wildlife and illegal use of lead ammunition could still pose a risk to wildlife and any reintroduced condors, said Chris West, the Yurok tribe's condor program manager. Yet West is hopeful about the bird's future. Starting this new population of California condors in the far northern portion of the state could offer the bird a better chance at continued survival overall, he argued. There's a big success in the number of birds out there, but you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, West said. Increasing the population could also help buffer the species against the increasing effects of wildfires, climate change and loss of genetic diversity. Condors are an important part of a healthy and functioning ecosystem. As scavengers, the birds are an essential part of nature's cleanup crew. Strong, big beaks allow them to open fresh carcasses, a task too difficult for their close relatives, the turkey vulture. Their efforts allow other wildlife to access the carcasses and accelerates the recycling of nutrients in the landscape. For the Yurok people, the return of the condor presents a milestone. The condor plays a critical role in the people's tradition and culture, and the return of the bird to ancestral territory brings with it a sense of renewal for both.
Corporations are not people too. Money is not speech. Man, in fact, it's the root of all. Right now, we have the right to be free. Corporations are not people too. Money is not speech. Man, in fact, it's the root of all. Right now, never defend your democracy.
Have you recently read the Constitution? There seems to be some type of confusion. I thought it said the people were the institution and not the corporations that simply want to use them. The truth is currently a fusion of corporate loot and our government that is outright abusive. People need change. The state, it refuses. They're saying we're mistaken. Well, show us where the proof is. They control the media, movies and the music, and determine where supplies of the water and food live. We need a strategy. Here is a solution.